brothers and sisters world over, across different continents, different countries, different time zones, different conditions. We hope you're taking care of yourself, you're taking care of your neighbors, your family, your community, your society, your civilization. Let's take care of each other, because from India, we always believe it is Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam. The whole world is one family, and all of us, we are together. Ladies and gentlemen, today during this pandemic, right from 25th of March, we have come a long way. Today is 457th webinar during this pandemic, making education relevant. What is the purpose of education? Why to take up education? Why to go to school? Why to go to college? Why to go to university? Why to acquire particular skill or competency? And this particular program, every Saturday in the evening, through the good efforts of Shri Sudeep Majumdarji, our advisor, ICSI, International Chamber for Service Industry, we bring. And today we have got a very distinguished guest with us, Dr. R. Balasubrmaniam ji. He is a development scholar, author, public policy advocate, leadership trainer, and activist. There's a lot to learn from him this evening. He's a founder, Swami Vivekananda Youth Movement. Wow. Founder and chairman, Grassroots Research and Advocacy Movement. We would request him to touch these points during his deliberations, during his views point. And with these words, ladies and gentlemen, let's move on. Enlightening talk on Swami Vivekananda's teaching for education and youth empowerment. Our chamber since 1994 is dedicated to the non-resident Indian world over. And as you're aware of now, at present, there are 5 deliberations going on, 5 internal meetings, virtual meetings are going on by the Ministry of External Affairs on 5 different themes. And 9th of January 2021, there will be a virtual summit, the next Parvasi Bharatiya Divas. And there's another news which I wish to share. This slide will get changed from Monday, because now the non-resident Indian diaspora, when you talk about, the figure has touched 31 million. We have moved from 30 million to 31 million. So during pandemic, we are talking about making education relevant Monday to Sunday. We were talking about Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam. All of us, we are together. From morning 9 till evening 9, 12 hours, we have got complimentary services world over. We start from Australia, Fiji, and New Zealand. We come to ASEAN. From there, we go to Middle East. Then we go to Central Asia. Then we go to Europe, then we come to South Asia and India. And after this, we have got 2 more programs, one on Ayurveda. And thereafter, the last program is with the NRIs from UK. So 26 programs almost we have got every week, which we are having, and all are making education relevant. Youth and teacher empowerment, because heartiest congratulations to Honorable Prime Minister of India, Education Minister of India, the new education policy which has come on 29 July. During pandemic, 152 countries, we have collected the data, and we have found that the next tragedy or the next crisis world over is going to be on the water, that is consumable water shortage. And cities like Bangalore, Chennai, and the state of entire Punjab in India, and there are a couple of other places which we have to take care of. That's why we have done the case study, what exactly South Africa have done, what Singapore has done, what Brazil has done, what other countries are doing. So every Friday evening at 5 p.m. from Singapore, like today, Saturday, we are on Swami Vivekananda. Friday evening, we are on water management strategies. Women empowerment is very important, next to our heart. Immediately after this program, today 6:30 p.m. for the whole world, because people have requested us, because at present there's a lot of Zoom, Cisco, and you have got Microsoft, Google, a lot of platforms and a lot of interactions and over usage of digital technology. So that's why the back pain and cervical and the sciatica, when you talk about these pains. So today, Dr. Parmeshwar Arora ji, he is going to talk to all of us how to get over this, how to avoid this, so that you can remain healthy. And thereafter at 8 p.m., we have got a special program today, because every Saturday and Sunday at 8 p.m., we are with the non-resident Indians. And today we are focusing on Northeast part of India. Honorable Prime Minister of India calls it Ashtalakshmi. There are 8 beautiful states. So today we are going to get a guest who will be coming to us from UK, Mr. Vishwajit Okram. He belongs to Manipur. At present, he is the financial advisor and he's working head of the finance at Thermit, UK, London. He will be with us today as an inspiration. During pandemic, we also found basic food, basic health, basic education. B2B is no more business to business, back to basics, sustainable development. And whatsoever human mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. Let's come together, making education relevant. This evening, we are privileged. We have been joined by Dr. R. Balasubrmaniam ji. He is a development scholar, author, public policy advocate, leadership trainer, and activist known for his pioneering development work with rural and tribal people in Saragur, that is Kote, Taluks of Mysuru in Karnataka. He founded the Swami Vivekananda Youth Movement, a development organization based in Saragur, where when he was 19. Wow. After spending 26 years in development work among rural and tribal people, he pursued academic degree in leadership, organizational development, and public policy. His books, Voices from the Grassroots and I, the Citizen, are compilation of narratives and reflections of a development activist and are now globally acclaimed. Dr. Balasubrmaniam ji is also the founder and chairman of the Grassroots Research and Advocacy Movement, a public policy think tank based out of Mysuru. Inspired by the message of Swami Vivekananda ji, he sees his life's mission as building a resurgent India by inspiring leadership in the youth of the country. Ladies and gentlemen, this evening is brought with the efforts of Mr. Sudeep Majumdar ji, the advisor to ICSI. He doesn't need any introduction because you see him every week, and this particular program is coming live to you on the YouTube. You can see it. So join me in extending a very, very hearty welcome to both the dignitaries. They are right over here, and it's a pleasure to have Dr. R. Balasubramaniam ji. There is a lot to learn because your entire the curriculum or curriculum vitae or the CV is so powerful. We have to pick up a lot of threads from you this evening. So I would request Sudeep Majumdar ji to kindly take on the floor, and further we move on from here.
Thank you, Dr. Gulshan Sharma ji. Very good evening to all the viewers across the globe. Welcome to the 16th episode of this webinar series on relevance of Swami Vivekananda's teachings in today's education and for youth empowerment under Making Education Relevant program, which is being organized by the International Chamber of Service Industries. This is the 457th episode. That is a great task. Thanks to ICSI for this noble initiative. I extend a very warm welcome to the speaker for the evening, Dr. Ramaswami Balasubramaniam, who would be speaking on the topic Swami Vivekananda, one of India's greatest leaders. Swami Vivekananda is regarded by some as one of the most celebrated spiritual leaders, by some as a prolific thinker, and still others as a great orator and a passionate patriot. When we read about his childhood, we find that even while playing with his friends, some of them were elder to him in age, he would invariably take up the role of a king. Swamiji was very bold and fearless and had a very strong common sense. As much as he respected elders and listened to them, he also had a strong instinct to verify the truth of what he heard. There are many instances when we read about his life, we find that. He had a natural affinity towards meditation from his early days. And at the same time, he was notoriously famous for his childhood pranks. Uh, you know, his soft and kind-heartedness is evident from his eagerness to give away things to the wandering monks, and also an incident from where we learn about him taking care of an injured English sailor who got hurt when the trapeze fell on him. We get a glimpse of his reasoning, a reasoning mind that he had, when we find him smoking tobacco from all the different pipes meant for the people from different sections of the society, which were kept in his father's sitting room, and concluding thereafter that they were all same, and he lost nothing, not even his caste, by smoking from all of them. That was the time when people, even when smoking from a common tobacco pipe, would tend to lose their caste. Swami Vivekananda was a born leader, and he exhibited all the various traits of a true leader from his very childhood. Not for nothing is he regarded as one of the greatest leaders of India. He was a visionary. He was full of creativity. He had an inspiring personality. He stood for honesty and integrity. He had a strong will to translate thoughts into action. He was full of empathy. He was devoid of jealousy and fully impartial. Swamiji practiced and advocated the concepts and qualities of servant leadership, the philosophy of empower and facilitate over command and control. He said, helping everyone grow is what one should be doing, working for the welfare of others and making everyone feel important. These are some of the things that we advocated. Miss MacLeod, who had the good fortune to meet many renowned people from across the world, had to say that when she met the Tsar of Russia and what she felt within quotes, how great he is and how small I am. She met Swami Vivekananda and felt, again I quote, how great he is and how great I am. The true leader in Swamiji helped her feel her own greatness, true to the saying that every soul is potential and divine. The purpose of life is to manifest the divinity within. I just touched upon some of the features that a true leader should have. And with these words, I would like to now invite the speaker for the evening, Dr. Ramaswami Balasubramaniam, who himself is a development scholar and author, a public policy advocate, a leadership trainer, an activist, and most importantly, an ardent follower of Swami Vivekananda. To enlighten us on the topic, Swami Vivekananda, one of the India's greatest leaders. Dr. Balasubramaniam, ji, the stage is set for you. I leave it open and we look forward to a very enlightening discourse from you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sudeep ji, and thank you for the introduction of the program and the introduction by Dr. Gulshan ji. It's really a privilege to be here and share some thoughts. At the outset, I must make a full disclosure. Everything I'm going to speak of in the next 30-35 minutes is unabashedly plagiarized from Swamiji's message. So I am not hesitant enough, or I don't want to live with a false modesty that anything from here is original, it's mine. It's definitely not. So with that disclosure, these are basically interpretations of mine. And so obviously if the interpretations are wrong, it is me to be blamed. But I try to see Swamiji from a particular lens, from a particular space, and from a particular level of intellectual maturity of mind. Vivekananda is a fascinating force. I can't even describe him as a person. It's not even a personality. Such a powerful force that it touches your life, depending on the stage of life that you are in, you get touched in different ways. So I was privileged that by sheer accident that I came across an enormous, powerful force called Swami Vivekananda. I mention this because I was a very young man, the least intent of even considering what I should do to society. At the age of 17, as a young man from a typical middle class family in Bangalore, your only intent is either become an engineer or a doctor and then go to the United States or UK, the next best option, and then life goes on. And I was wanting to get into the engineering program into IIT, and unfortunately, IITs felt that I was not good enough to get into them, so I couldn't qualify for that. And I had a very high marks in PCM, and I thought I could get into what those days were called RECs, RECs, Regional Engineering Colleges. Now they're known as NITs. With 99.67%, I thought I could get into this college. It's not going to be difficult. That's the year they introduced computer science, and that's the world of computer science. Just coming in, Infosys was just about to, it had not started, and so we are all fascinated by this new word, computers, and all these things. But I didn't qualify. I was waitlisted as one, because there's only one seat. Very disappointed. I took some college in Bangalore, and first day of college, I was so badly ragged. Ragging was a real problem those days. No, people don't even know what ragging is. That I didn't have the courage to go back to class the next day. I make all this background information to all of you. I share this with you, not because to tell you what my storyline is, but to tell you how much of an influence Swami Vivekananda was on my life. Now, at 17, I believe every one of us is an ambitious young man. The pendulum swings between personal ambition and a sense of socialistic responsibility. And we are confused. And depending on which side the pendulum decides to stick to, your life gets shaped. And in that confusion, being ragged, didn't have the courage to go back to college the next day. Coming from a typical middle-class family, grounded in its values and its middle-class thinking, my mother would obviously not give me enough money to go sit in a theater. At the same time, not allow me to while away my time. So I had to find something to do. And the only thing I could do was, thankfully for me, beside this college was the Ramakrishna Ashram in Bangalore. And like Ramakrishna missions, like in most places, are lovely campuses, beautiful and clean, lovely gardens. So I just started strolling around the Bangalore ashram. Couple of days of doing this, I would go home and tell my mother half-day class. College has just started, so half-day class. So I got away for 2-3 days. Then I realized that I can't do this trick for too long. But in the ashram, the brahmacharis and the monks there started noticing me like a vagabond walking around. And there are a lot of fruit trees in Bangalore ashram. They thought maybe this young boy has come to steal a fruit or two and then satisfy his hunger. So with simple intent of not wanting to look like a thief, I went and sat in the Ramakrishna Ashram library in Bangalore. It's very close to the gate itself. So I thought, now the monks will think I'm a very serious, ardent, potential monk. So they let me get away with this. The next 2 months changed my life. Obviously, at 17, you understand Swamiji from a particular lens, right? A lens of restlessness, a lens of I want to do something but don't know what, looking for some guidance, a guidance which you think is not inside you. And the next 2 months, I read the complete works, 8 volumes those days. And I can promise you I never understood much of it. But I read it like reading an English book. And that's the beauty of Swamiji. I must have read it, I don't even know how many times now in my life, but every time I go back to it, a stronger, more powerful, more meaningful, more rational messages hits me. Now I always ask myself, did Swamiji change? Or did I become better? And that's exactly what Vivekananda must have meant when he said, our life is a journey of traveling from one level of truth to the other, to the next. And I believe that's what is my experience of Swamiji's message itself. And a few years ago, studying, teaching regularly in many of the Ivy League institutions around the world, in India, especially teaching a course on leadership. One day I sat back and asked myself, there's so much of research that is happening in this world of leadership. I remember one of my colleagues and the professor of leadership sharing this information with me, and I think the number would have gone up and not down. Close to 26,000 books on leadership gets published in the United States alone. Forget India. And somehow this myth that leadership is a westernized concept. We don't even believe that we have leadership as a science, as something that we know of, something very powerful in India. So I was very disturbed. The more I got into my research, the more I got into the studying of leadership as a science and an art, it suddenly hit me after 35, 36 years of living in indigenous tribals. These tribals taught me more about leadership than anybody else had, any Western professor could teach me. And then I realized it's not just the indigenous tribal communities. My ability to understand the leadership actually stemmed from my ability to understand and interpret Swamiji's message itself. Then fascinatingly for me, every time I started reading Swami Vivekananda, I realized that the current so-called modern principles of management and leadership were deeply embedded in his message. It is just that I did not have the lens to see Swamiji from that point of view. And we always see him from the point of view we like and adore him, right? For a long time, for me, he was a great monk. He was God. And for me, I always see him as, I see God in him. And that's what he means to me. And then suddenly I see him as a human being who's capable of leadership. It's difficult. So unpacking Swamiji itself is a complex process for people like me, because we all work with differential levels of ignorance. And so we interpret him that way. But I deliberately, the last decade, I've started looking at him and unpacking him purely from the lens of leadership. So whatever I'm going to share now is reflective of two things. It is reflective of my current level of maturation. So it doesn't mean that that is a final word of understanding Swamiji itself. It is just my limited understanding of Swamiji. And secondly, possibly if you ask me to give the same talk 5 years later, I can promise you it will be far more different. That's a disclosure I want to make. So let me share what little I have scratched the surface of this extraordinary personality, this force, this enormity which we in India have not really decoded or figured out. So here was a person who was not just human in one side, divine in the other. The extraordinary equilibrium with which he operated, the balance with which he could, not just guide his brother disciples, but to even vision out what could be done for the nation at large, as well as the small institution that he built at that point of time. You cannot even, you have to really start unpacking him at multiple layers. And so for me, I started asking myself, how would Vivekananda have defined leadership itself if he were to be alive today? And we had a chance to have a conversation with him. And we had invited him to this session. And we could ask him this question, Swamiji, tell us, how would you define leadership? And I would, or whom would you call a leader? And I am sure, my way of interpreting Swamiji's answer, Swamiji would say, there is no leader in this world. Though he himself writes about being a leader. Today, I am sure Swamiji will say, that it's not about being a leader. He would say it's about exercising leadership. And that is the enormous message that I first unpacked from Swamiji. Because it's not about being a leader, it's about exercising leadership. And how would Swamiji look at leadership even? Because in the letter that he writes to Mysuru Maharaja, coming from Mysuru, I have to quote this. Though that sentence goes from the perspective of service, Swamiji talks about the vanities of life are transient. In one sentence, he simply dismisses of very purpose of what we think is consumerism. Right? The vanities of life are transient, but he alone lives, who lives for others. But he doesn't stop there. He could have stopped there. But he says the rest are more dead than alive. That's the beauty of his message. He not only says that he alone lives, who lives for others, gives a purpose for people who want to live, but also calls out and shames people who don't live for others and says, you're actually as good as dead. Now that is the power of his message when you start deconstructing. And then it hit me. Living for others is not about being anybody. So in Swamiji's message, it's not about being somebody who's working for others. It is about living your life for others. What could he have meant? And where does the message of leadership come from this? So my understanding and definition of leadership flows from this beginning statement of Swamiji. To me, leadership is an activity. It is karma yoga as described by Swami Vivekananda. And how would I capture it in one sentence? The entire message would be for me. It is an activity. But what do you do in this activity? All of us are doing activity all the time. Swamiji himself says, can you stay inactive? But look at Swamiji's message. In one place he says, intense activity amidst inactivity and inactivity amidst activity. That's the secret of karma yoga, right? But how do you bring this down to a level where you and I can reduce this abstraction to a workable level? Because every morning we need to get up and go to the office. I coach political leaders, I coach CEOs of organizations, and I can't simply tell them just live your life for others. They need they say, give me a list of do's and don'ts. That's how the world operates. Now, if we do not reduce Swamiji's abstraction to concrete, doable items, we'll miss the message. So I tried to put together a definition which I have understood from what he has said from all the different places. I wouldn't quote everything for lack of time. Swamiji talks about, for me it is, leadership is an activity. An activity of doing what? Activity of mobilizing ourselves and the resources around us. Because he calls every person potentially divine. How do you mobilize the divinity within yourself? How do you mobilize the divinity around everybody? How do you mobilize the enormity of feeling where you're all one? It is not easy. That is true leadership, where you are not the person, but you are one with everybody else. So leadership to me is an activity of mobilizing ourselves and the resources around us. For what? For doing something societally constructive. That is living the life for others, Swamiji said. For doing something societally constructive amidst enormous uncertainty. And this is the powerful message Swamiji gives, because Swamiji knew that you might do it, But if you don't do it in the spirit of an instrument of God, there are two dangers there. And that's a danger that I see concretely in megalomaniac leadership around the world today, whether they are the heads of government or heads of companies. They believe, I am doing this, I am running the country, I am running the state, I am running this company, I am running the university. And Swamiji knew the danger and he could warn us, because he knew one of the objectives of leadership should be your ability to learn to manage your hungers. How do you manage your personal hungers? When you become famous, you look at around the world how leaders fall, so-called leaders fall. Whether it is the White House or something else, it's the same. Leaders fall because they failed in their ability to manage their hungers. They think they're invincible and they forget that name, fame, all that can cloud your judgment to such an extent that you cannot perform in the act of leadership if you want to live your life for others. Understanding this, Swamiji said, know that you are an instrument. Consider yourself privileged that things get done through you. And that feeling of being an instrument of having something done for society leads me to the way I look at leadership differently. So for me, leadership is not about doing something, but allowing yourself for something to get done through you. So it's about the work at the center and not about you being at the center. So it is not about simple that one word of ego management. Look at the simplicity of Vivekananda's message. He said, because if you simply tell a person to work without the identity of I, we'll go crazy. We cannot operate. We are all not Ramana Maharishis or Swamiji or Guru Maharaj to say that I can operate with that feeling. We are ordinary people who need an extraordinary message packed in an ordinary way. And so the way I look at it is, all of us have a work at the center. To give an example, my own personal example, and what hit me very strongly was my own life. Several years ago, I was invited to be and it's a very painful example from a personal level. I was invited to be the head of the Vivekananda chair of the Mysuru University. And the first day I gave such a powerful talk, the audience was full, the auditorium was full, everybody came and applauded to me. In the first row were all the previous heads of the chair sitting. Extraordinary Jains, intellectual Jains and people of great repute and deep study of Swamiji and his message. Here was a young man, very young, to be appointed the head of the chair. I came down and one of the former chairs, an extraordinary person, came and told me, when I would give a lecture, 4 or 5 people would be there. But your lecture, look at this, 400, 500 people, the hall is full. I felt so thrilled. Wow, I've really shaken the crowd. I must be great. I must be wonderful. I really understood Swamiji's message that I can deliver it so eloquently to everybody. And then as I was going back, I was still living in the forest those days. I was driving back from Mysuru to the forest. Suddenly it hit me, what the hell did I just do? How could I even claim credit to speak when things were getting spoken through me? I felt so small and vulnerable that I went back to the Vice Chancellor and told him, please, I made a mistake. Please take back the professor responsibility from me. I cannot do this anymore. I am incompetent and absolutely wrong person to be representing Swamiji and his message in such a university which had Radhakrishna chairing the department and the same department I'm Vivekananda chair. It's absolutely wrong. And Vice Chancellor, being caught in his own bureaucratic thinking, said, you know what, appointing somebody is easy. Removing somebody is a bigger problem in the media today. So please don't, even if you don't do anything, you come and go, but don't resign right now. But that gave me some time to think. I told him 2 months, I'm not going to come back. I started walking. I walked 420 kilometers. I told myself, if there's an element of truth in what Swamiji says, if there's an element of truth in my conviction that he is a divine force for me, I'm going to surrender myself to him and say, I will just walk till I feel that I'm confident and competent enough to even accept this onerous responsibility. And those 28 days of my life were possibly the most transformative time. I'm giving this example because Swamiji works in mysterious ways. We don't even understand his way of operation. Just because we don't understand doesn't mean he's not operating. And those 28 days, by the time I finished it, I didn't take the challenge I gave to myself, a very childish challenge. I said, I will not take a rupee with me. I will not ask for help from anybody. People give me food, I'll eat. If there's a place to sleep on, I'll sleep. It could be the veranda of a courtyard of a house, a veranda of a temple, or a bus stand. I don't care. By the time I reached Bangalore, I had at least at different points of time 400 to 500 people walking with me. Every village people offered us food. In fact, sometimes they would give us feastly food. It would be embarrassing to say no, but By the time I reached that point, I realized what this force was all about. And what he meant, that the work at the center matters, not you, you fool. It is not about you. It's about allowing yourself, being vulnerable enough to allow yourself to be an instrument of that powerful force. Call it by whatever name you want. An expression of divinity has to come with an understanding of surrender. And to me, leadership is all about this appreciation of surrender, not from an important space, not from a helpless space, but from an enormously mature, not just an intellectualized phase, but an enormously experiential phase where you give yourself into this fascinating process that opens up before you. And like I said, to me, it's Vivekananda. For somebody else, it could be Krishna, somebody else could be Allah, somebody else could be any God that you name it. But that is when I understood leadership is embedded so strongly in the message of Swamiji, because my inability to read and understand it was the problem. So from defining it, I asked myself, what would Swamiji expect my attitude to be? What would he want? If I were to ask somebody to express leadership, what would I tell him? And again, I go back to what Swamiji says. So simplistic. No, today in the schools of management and leadership, what we teach are three things. We say leadership is about motivation. We say leadership is about strategy. And we say leadership is about action. When I talk about this in a leadership school, it looks as though whoever discovered it 50 years ago must have been a great discovery, connecting motivation, strategy, and action. But it's such a complex thing to understand it. How do you deconstruct motivation? How do you deconstruct strategy? How do you deconstruct action? It looks as though it's a very specialized science. But look at the beauty of Swami Vivekananda. He said it so beautifully. All you need is 3 H, he said. The heart to feel. Now, how much more it could be? Emotion, right? Today we talk about, I write and talk, and my research is on the neurobiology of leadership, how the human brain can actually guide your leadership expression. And look at how Swamiji showed it so beautifully, as though he was a great neuroscientist who had understood this. Without any neuroimaging techniques, he could actually tell us what it meant. He said it so beautifully, heart to feel. He said, feel, my children, feel for the poor, the marginalized, the downtrodden. Because he knew that from the heart emerges the power. From the basal part of the brain is what emerges the motivation, right? And then he didn't stop there. He said motivation also should be as an expression to do good to others, society. And then you must have a strategy. I might feel intensely for indigenous tribals I lived with. What's the point in feeling? The people cannot fill their stomachs with feeling. I must feel for their poverty. I must feel for their hunger. I must feel for their lack of homes. I must feel for their lack of territory that they could have had for cultivating land, lack of understanding from the government. And then I must strategize and think, what can I do about it? And that involves strategy. So leadership had to feel, the head to think, Swamiji said. What beautiful. Such simple words. And then he said, the hands to work. We must get down to work. Not carrying the banner saying, hey, I am working. But the banner that the work is getting done through me. And understanding this is the first simple lesson of leadership I got. And look at Swamiji's life. His life, his message, his actions. If you deconstruct it, is one continuum of leadership expression. Having that vision, right? Extraordinary vision, saying, I will keep being born again and again till the last man on this earth can discover that is what divinity himself. That is a vision that Swamiji gave himself, that every man is divine and he has to understand it. He didn't say, I will give him moksha. Look at the beauty of Swamiji's life. He himself was not given moksha by Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. He said, you'll have to work hard for it. So leadership is the ability to give the work back to people where it rightfully belongs. That is a great message that Swami Vivekananda teaches us. It is not about doing their work for them. That is what a person in authority will do. You can rush to the CEO and say, please, sir, I don't know how to solve this problem. He has to justify being the CEO, so he'll solve it for you. He gets his affirmation of power and authority only if he demonstrates it by actually doing something that you cannot. But Vivekananda's thinking was different. It was all about not doing it for you, but enabling you to do it yourself. You have to work hard for your moksha. You have to struggle in this world. This is a world, is a gymnasium, he said. And we have to be the person exercising it. Somebody else cannot exercise and say, I become healthy. I have to exercise to stay healthy. And that's the beauty of Swamiji's message. Swamiji understood that vision of leading man towards that expression of divinity. And from Swamiji, the greatest message I learned is leadership is not something complex. In simple word, leadership is one endless spiritual journey. And operating in the zone of spirituality comes only when you are that humility to do so, when you have that compassion to operate with that, when you have all these qualities that I'll enumerate later, if I were to pick those qualities in Swamiji's life can teach us in his expression of leadership, and I'll talk about it later, how they actually act on the brain. And simple call, like along with the 3H, what should the leader be constantly aware of? And again, taking Swamiji's message, the 3 Ps, he said, because he understood that without this, you cannot express leadership. First thing he said is purity. Now, leadership, the person exercising leadership should be purity incarnate, purity of thought, word, and deed. There is no compromise on this. You cannot even call somebody as a person exercising leadership or trying to be a leader if he's compromising on purity. Purity encompasses everything, morality, ethics, the way you think, the way you operate, everything is there embedded in it. And somebody said it so powerfully. Even if you think in your mind a corrupt thought, whether it's about a woman or it's about anything that you can think of, it's as good as the deed itself, he said. And for a person exercising leadership, this is a very powerful mantra. You cannot even afford to slip in your thoughts, that level of purity. You just try this out and you'll see the enormous power that will come with you. Like Swamiji said, you will become a dynamo. And several people I have seen in this world who actually genuinely embrace Swamiji and his message, they may not be known, they may not be celebrated, they may not be written about. They care a damn about all that. But they are powerful human dynamos, whether inside the mission or outside, quietly doing what they think is Swamiji's message, living that message. That is leadership. Role modeling his thoughts, that is leadership. So that power that Swamiji talks, purity. And then a leader has to be extremely patient. It's very easy to lose your, like the Bhagavad Gita says, once you get angry and your senses get clouded, everything is lost. Swamiji knew that. Though Swamiji used to have flashes of his temper is also legendary, as much as his compassion. But we should understand that they were all expressions to show us what we should not be. In its own way, it's a fascinating way. Patience. We have to be extremely patient with everybody, with ourselves. Most of us forget. We think patience is about being patient with others. Many times being patient with our own inadequacies, being patient with our own inconsistencies, being patient with our own vulnerabilities. We have to learn that. And lastly, perseverance. You cannot exercise leadership in the world today if you are not going to persevere for the cause for which you set out to do. The purpose should drive us, and purpose is going to test you. Swamiji's entire organizational development philosophy, if I were to crystallize it, looking at the Ramakrishna mission today, what a powerful organization is left us with. More than 100 years later, not an iota, not a speck of comment anybody can make. Why is it? It's because of the extraordinary foundation Swami Vivekananda made and his philosophy of 3 principles. He looked at the people. For him, people matter. Building the people, rigorous training, rigorous ways of looking at it, unconditional compliance to what those principles are. And if you fail, you're out of the system. Second is the process. Look at an extraordinary process. Any mission you visit, anywhere in the world. I have traveled extensively to the centers. I'm not saying this because I am an ardent admirer or devotee of the mission and Swamiji. I would challenge anybody to go test it out like Swamiji himself says, because leadership is about eternal experimentation. Leadership is not about being simply dogmatically believing in it. And if you understand Vivekananda, that's exactly what he wants us to be, an eternal experimenter. So what has he created and left behind? This legacy that is left behind is people, process, and the product. And look at the beauty of the product. If the product was only Atmano Mokshartham, people would not have come in the numbers that we see today. Even today, it's a challenge to get the numbers. But look at the beauty. Society would not have supported that institution if they had simply said Atmano Mokshartham. He knew that product has to be personal and public. Look at the vision of the extraordinary man. That is leadership. The product was not only my personal evolution and understanding that I am divine, but in that expression, I must do public good. I must Atmano Mokshatam Jagat Hitaya. Look at the power of that message, the beauty of that message. The society should grow. That is unconditional. In the process of allowing the society to grow and evolve, you're also evolving and growing, and that is, and you want. Don't think that you are the one growing society. Be thankful that you're being given the opportunity, a gymnasium to play around and exercise and grow stronger. Where else can you find this kind of visionary thinking? And to me, that is extraordinarily powerful. And that is why the organization is what it is today. And those of us who are closely associated, those of us who learn from them, seek guidance from them, we know some of the great monks. My life has been built on mentorship from Swami Sureshananji of Mysuru. He just passed away last year. Without him and this understanding of Swami Vivekananda that he transmitted to me, I know that I would have been a zero. I wouldn't even have been able to have the courage to do what I could have done in life, or what was God done through me in life. And that beauty comes from that power called Vivekananda. And finally, look at the way that man never even put himself in the center. He came, he set up, he disappeared. The mission continues. Even today, you can ask anybody, even admirers like us, who is the president of the Ramakrishna order? Many of us will not even know it. Many of us may not even be aware. And that is the beauty of the leadership. Succession planning is a word which is very common today. But Vivekananda lived the succession and made it the DNA of the organization itself. It doesn't matter who is the head of the organization. The ideology grows and continues. The true test of leadership is the organization surviving even without the leader. So the true test of a leader is not by asking him what is he doing by his presence. The real test of a leader is assessing what happens in his absence. A leader should be present by his absence. That is the most powerful message Vivekananda teaches us. Can we as people understand him and be present in whatever we do by our absence? And in conclusion, I would like to share what, if I were to distill Swamiji's life and lesson and message, I pick 8 intrinsic guidelines, principles, values that I see from him. And I'm saying from the study of his works in different places. So I'm not going to, for lack of time, I'm not going to say which book and which chapter and which things like that. But what do I pick from him? I pick 8. If I were to imitate unabashedly Swamiji, what would I imitate? I would imitate 8 qualities that I would like to learn from him. And I would try to keep learning from him. The first quality, compassion. Look, and I'm telling you, these qualities are not just qualities I picked from him. Today there is research. There's research in Case Western University and other places in the US where people have actually understood that the 4 greatest values that they have picked up from people who have been successful in the exercise of leadership are 4 of the same values that I picked up from Swami Vivekananda far ahead before the paper was published. But then the Western world publishes proclaims it and then talks about its authenticity, but we simply give talks on YouTube and write a small article here, and then we don't even put it on the leadership journals, and we think India doesn't have anything to offer. I can say even the word servant leadership, which was popularized by Greenleaf, was hardly 1930s. Swamiji spoke the exact word in the 1990s itself. But we don't credit Swami Vivekananda. We credit Harvard in 1960 for the use of those terms. But then we need to start talking all this to make it more popular, not because Vivekananda wants credit. It's because I believe by crediting Swami Vivekananda and his message to all these wonderful lessons, we may decode more lessons from him and make this world a better place. It is the urgency with which you have to understand Swamiji, and that's the reason I'm quoting these 8 examples. The 4 might have been authenticated by research, but all 8 are there. Whether it is Swamiji's Raja Yoga and his understanding of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, or his own Karma Yoga or Jnana Yoga, I picked it up in different locations, but I'll just put those 8 points. First is compassion, enormous compassion. Swamiji lived compassion, and compassion might be a strict disciplinarian also. Demanding a discipline from a person also needs compassion. It's not easy. Otherwise, you will become a monster. But look at Swamiji. That is his love for people who are so demanding of your compliance of certain spiritual disciplines. Whether it's Sister Nivedita or his brother monks, it didn't matter to him. Everybody had to have those disciplines. Compassion towards us, compassion towards everything, every creature in this world. Second is faith and hope. Look at the faith that Swamiji asks us to have. He said, you might have faith in the 33,000 crore God that Hinduism might create, but if you have no faith in yourself, you're an atheist. Enormous faith in ourselves. His faith is different from arrogance. No, when you're overconfident, it borders on arrogance. But his faith is driven by self-confidence and the enormous sense of self-surrender to a higher force. That kind of faith. I combine faith and hope as one message from Swamiji. Every line of Swamiji is always so hopeful. There is hope that even the worst sinner can become a saint. What greater hope can you give to people? Faith and hope, extraordinary qualities of leadership. And then Swamiji's sense of humor. No, today, learning to laugh is an art, but when you want message you learn from Swamiji is you don't laugh at people. You laugh with people, and that's a big distinction. And that is leadership. That's powerful leadership. Spirit of self-inquiry. Spirituality, in my opinion, The lesson I learned from Swami Vivekananda is one endless continuum of self-inquiry. The simple question Ramana asks us to ask, who am I? And if we keep extrapolating it, why am I born here? Why am I invited to this webinar? Why am I sharing these thoughts? Why? The constant process of self-inquiry. Why am I placed in this position? What has given me the privilege to be doing this work? Finding answers to that is spirituality. And that's why leadership is one continuous spiritual journey. That sense of humor and that spirit of self-inquiry. Spirit of service. Look at the beauty of Swamiji's message. He said to help somebody is blasphemous. He said, you cannot help anybody. Who are you to help? He says. All we can do is serve others. There's a huge distinction. Help is transactional. I do something for you, you may do something for me. Service, he says, look at the beauty of that service. The surrender in the service is, I worship the divinity in you. Shivajnane Jiva Seva. I understand myself by looking at the divinity in you and surrender myself to the divinity. The process of surrender manifests as expression of work that I do for you physically, intellectually or spiritually, and therefore I am worshiping. That spirit of service. Leadership, servant leadership, the real concept of Vivekananda is not to simply act like a servant, but to completely destroy your inner sense of I and surrender completely to that powerful force and just be the instrument. And with that attitude of worshipping the divine, doing what you have to do in the act of leadership. That's a very powerful message. Everything Swamiji says is positivism. In Swamiji, there's nothing negative. And I realize leadership is all about positivism. Today, science tells us that there are two kinds of temperament in the world of leadership. We say positive emotional activators and negative emotional activators. Swamiji says in one place, if you get up in the morning and you find yourself sulking, he says, don't leave the room. Why do you want to leave the room and destroy somebody else's life outside? I never understood it when I read him first time when I was 17 or 18 years. Today I know. Research shows us there's something called mirroring neurons in the hypothalamus. If I'm intensely agitated, I mirror my agitation onto you and you become agitated. So we become a negative emotional activator. If I'm intensely pleasant and level of sita pragnate and I go and meet other people, the satsanga and the ecosystem, my positivism spills over on you. So today it is real. Neuroscience tells us that we can mirror thoughts and emotions onto others. It's a very powerful thing. And positivism is something which Swamiji teaches. If you're positive, you keep releasing oxytocin, which can be measured. The moment you're negative, you keep releasing cortisol. Small release of cortisol. By the end of the day, it becomes a huge stress event. Micro stress event can add up to major stress. Understanding Swamiji, you can be amidst the water, but you'll never get wet like the lotus leaf. That's the beauty of Swami Vivekananda. He taught us how to lead our life. And that's a message we need to take from the leadership perspective. And finally, Swamiji's power of abhihi, fearlessness. Look at the beauty. Western psychologists can talk about courage. I'm so courageous that I can live with my fear. But for Swamiji, living with fear is no courage. For him, it is fearlessness, is transcending fear itself. So it's not about risk-taking the management world teaches you. It's about transcending fear. That's what leadership is all about. And that's the beauty of Swamiji's message, abhihi. And finally, the eighth quality. If you understand Vivekananda, you understand whatever place he was, whatever he did, writing, readings, lectures. Look at that enormity of mindful existence Swamiji left us with. That biggest message from Swamiji's life is that mindfulness. He was constantly mindful, and you can deconstruct him. He could be asking, am I mindful of my compassion? Am I mindful of my faith and hope? Am I mindful of expressing my sense of humor, my spirit of service? Am I mindful about being positive? And once you have that is the closest you can come to understanding Swami Vivekananda and living a life where you will have an opportunity to evolve yourself and a life by expressing this leadership. You can do good to society too. So to me, I can keep talking. Swamiji is everything in my life, and I can keep talking for days together. But I know time is a constraint, and I want to conclude by saying, just watching Swamiji, reading his life, understanding it, just taking pieces, bits and pieces from here and there, can help us grow not just ourselves, but learn to make this world a better place. A world which is destroyed by polarization, a world which is destroyed by petty-mindedness, a world which is divided, a world which doesn't understand universalization that Swamiji spoke about. What the world desperately needs is this message of Vivekananda. And if people can understand it only through the lens of leadership, so be it. And that is why I have chosen this path, where if we can infuse a generation of young people with this powerful message of Swamiji and say, if you understand Swamiji, you will be extraordinary leader. And if they're selfish enough to accept that, so be it. I don't mind, because society will be better. And at some point of time, they'll be able to drown their own selfishness, which I believe happened to me because of the grace and blessings of Swami Vivekananda. And at some point of time, expressing this selflessness in a small ways for the betterment of society, all of us will be better for them. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Dr. Balasubramaniam ji. That was a bombshell in a nutshell.
Thank you.
Yes, your concluding remarks, pointing out the 8 features of leadership that we see it when we read and we try to understand Swamiji. We see it that he lived these qualities in his life, and that is why he has been an inspiration. When you started and you were talking about your experiences, and I could relate to some of them. When you said that as a young boy of 17, you started reading the complete works, and you read it because you wanted to pass time, not much that you understood at that time. It was around the same age when I started reading complete works too. And believe me, I couldn't finish. Even today, I have not been able to finish the whole of complete works at one stretch whenever I've sat down. Read, and at some point of time, there is so much of energy that comes into you. You want to be into action, and you start thinking, what the hell am I doing? And that particular feeling, I think you'll be able to understand. It grows to such an enormous point that it becomes difficult to confine you within the confinement that we are in the society and that particular point of time that we are expected to do. They're not always free to go around. You were fortunate enough where you just walked away into the forest, and you could spend time with yourself and do with the people around there what you read and heard about Swamiji. But most of the people are not that fortunate enough. We were talking about some of your books also just before we went live. And Dr. Gulshan Sharma ji had asked me to remind you to let us and everybody know about the powerful writings that you have written. It might do so much good to so many people, I know. We would love to hear a bit about it, if you please.
Yeah, for me, I always felt, sometimes I say, I started writing more as an expression of to preserve my sanity, because this restlessness that you spoke about, this enormous energy, and when you feel you have to do something, but sometimes system conspires and you believe that you're not allowed to express that energy. I decided to start writing. Therefore, the energy flowed through writing. And there are 7 books I've written, 4 in English and 3 in Kannada, local language. The first book I wrote is called Vivekananda as I See Him. And I'm very clear with the title, as I see him. So each one can see him differently. And if I write the same book again now, it will be completely different. Because more than 8 or 10 years ago I wrote it. Today I see him differently, and 10 years later I'll see him differently. And as I started thinking about this book, as I see him, I said, what in my life, my views on human development, my views on policy, because my specialization, my MPhil was in health systems management, it was on strategic management. My study at the Harvard Kennedy School was on public administration, my fellowship was on leadership, etc. I knew everything is founded on the principles of Swamiji and his message. So I said, even if my human development thinking is driven by his thinking, what are those messages? And that's when I wrote the book, I, the Citizen. And that's about challenging the traditional notions of development. I do not believe in a $5 trillion economy. It's about building people. So I believe in the theory of change, that if you, like Swamiji said, man-making character building. I call it building human and social capital. I say if you build human and social capital, they'll have powerful, enormous economic consequences. We are wasting our time building economic capital. You do these two properly, that will happen. That's what Swamiji said, the means. We're so focused on the end that we forgotten the means. I, the Citizen, began with that. And the next book, and that became very popular. It got republished by Cornell University Press. It's become a big textbook in the US. A lot of development schools and policy schools use it as a textbook now. And the third book I thought was, we somehow ignore ordinary people. You know, Swamiji had this extraordinary ability. He could move with the Maharajas, he could move with the man on the street. And there's so many things you can learn from that. Because for him, he couldn't differentiate because the messages he got was the same for him. So I was looking at my life and said, what is the message that I lived mostly with the man on the street, among the poorest of the poor in the forest. And I realized their voices are not heard because we live in a world of elitism. We live in a world where if I, as a professor of Cornell, come and teach, people will listen. If I, as a Harvard alumnus, talk, they'll listen. But if I talk from the forest, nobody will listen. So I decided to capture those voices of extraordinary wisdom. So I say extraordinary wisdom of what society calls ordinary people. So these is voices from the grassroots. That also became very popular. Then this concern of leadership being monopolized by the Western world irritated me. So the expression of that anger, I say I'm going to put Swamiji's message and the message from the Gita that I get as into anecdotes, real life anecdotes where I see people actually in real life, ordinary people who express this leadership. From Swami Sureshanandi to Swami Vivekananda in whom I admire, to Guru Maharaj's statement of seeing God in man, everything I put it together, I saw anecdotes, captured those anecdotes, and then wrote a very detailed leadership message. That book is called Leadership Lessons for Daily Living. Because it is not about some extraordinary CEO or some head of a country or a corporate entity. Every human being has to exercise leadership. To me, leadership is a spiritual activity. And the moment you exercise leadership, you evolve, society evolves. And that is the book. My next book, which is still work under progress for 10 years, which is completely embedded in Swamiji's DNA and thought, these 8 qualities I spoke about now, is called Exercising Enlightened Leadership, the 8-fold path towards leadership. And these 8 messages of Swamiji. So I'm trying to validate it through Western research, but quoting extensively from Indian scriptures and Swamiji's message. And I hope that in my lifetime I'll finish that book. So that is still work in progress, but someday I hope to finish it. Thank you for asking.
Yeah. When we talk about inspiring, a leader needs to inspire, and what better leader can we have other than Vivekananda, who had inspired so many across a section of the society, across ages. He has expired in the past. He is still inspiring people, and he will go on inspiring people for centuries to come. Whether it be the people from the field of naturally God seekers and spiritual aspirants, it's natural for them to get inspired by Swamiji. But he has gone on to inspire people beyond that particular section also. He has inspired politicians across the globe. He has inspired so many industrialists, so many authors. He has inspired the youth. He is an inspiration for the youth. And the biggest thing is, he doesn't talk of a small period of time. Whatever he talks is so eternal. It is going to go on, and that is why even after 120 years, almost 120 years since he left his mortal self, he still keeps inspiring people, and he'll keep on inspiring for the next 1400 years if we go by his prophecy that he is a voice without a form, and he is going to inspire for the next 1500 years. With these words, I would like to thank ICSI, and I would like to thank Dr. Balasubrmaniam ji for this wonderful discourse, powerful lecture that we heard. I hope the youngsters who have heard him will really be inspired. And uh, I just want to add one thing. After hearing him, people should make it a practice to read Swamiji. Read Swamiji if you want to understand your own self. Read Swamiji if you want to know your own country, whichever country you belong to. Okay. And read Swamiji if you want to succeed in life in whatever sector you want to work. Be pure and be honest, and always remember that each soul is potentially divine, as you rightly said, Dr. Balasubramaniam. Because if we know that we are the divinity, then there is no other way that we can lose our confidence in ourselves. We can do anything and everything, but we have to follow a particular rule and a path. And that path and rule is laid down by many great teachers of the world. And just like them, Swamiji has also laid down the same path for us to follow. Thank you. I hand over the proceedings to Dr. Gulshan Sharma ji to wind up the session. Thank you.
Yeah,
So much.
thank you very much, Sudeep Majumdar ji. My deepest regards and gratitudes to Dr. R. Balasubramaniam ji. He was very humble to mention that R basically Ramaswamy stands for his father, and then he takes the title Balasubrmaniam ji. Now, this SVYM, what you have got at the back, would you be kind enough, because somebody has asked me to elaborate that?
It's the Swami Vivekananda Youth Movement.
Youth movement.
Youth
Youth
movement.
movement.
I was
Okay.
I was actually young when I founded it. So it's
Okay.
a
And secondly, somebody has asked me that these 4 books which you have given in English and 3 in Kannada, are they available in audio form?
Not in audio form, unfortunately. They're available on Amazon. Either Citizen is in the US is available as in Amazon.com, published by Cornell University Press, both the Kindle edition as well as the print edition. All the other books in India are available, except Either Citizen doesn't have a Kindle edition because the rights are with Cornell University.
Right.
Either Citizen in the print form, Voices from the Grassroots, and Leadership Lessons for Daily Living are available, and Vivekananda as a CM are available in English in Amazon.in for India. Outside, I think Amazon.com has only got Either Citizen and Kindle version of Leadership Lessons and Either Citizen.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. I think we are more humble after hearing you, such insight views. And as you see, in a very polite way, making education and life relevant. So I will take final word from there, what you mentioned. Build human capital, the economic capital will automatically be built. Don't bother about the 5 trillion economy. Thank you, sir. It was such a privilege to have you this evening with us. And we look forward to many more such occasions to learn and to pick up the best of the gracious views of yours. Thank you, sir.